Good morning, everyone. And there's 10 more minutes of morning, so it is good morning. These other speakers have left me a very hard act to follow. A couple of things I wanted to say before I get into this little speech, sermon, dissertation, whatever you want to call it. One of them is, I can't find my notes. No, I'll find it in a minute. We have one of these Martin boys over in northwest Arkansas. His name is Rod Martin. And I understand that him and Skip grew up together. And we tolerate him, we love him too. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is I spent about 4 years in Toastmasters International, and they taught us to open a sermon or a speech or whatever it might be with a question. So I'm going to do that in a minute. I was in Memphis one time at a speaking contest with another man, and he didn't show up, and I won second place. So I felt pretty good about it. So I'm going to ask you a question this morning. How many of you have ever seen me? Yeah? You have. You know, I've been married to my wife, which is sitting back here looking at me with both eyes, wondering what's he going to say next. I've been married to her. We have been married 56 years. And you know, I'll have to say I've never seen her, or she's never seen me. I'll clarify that in a minute. We've got 4 children, ranging ages from 46 to 55. In fact, the youngest one's birthday is today. I was going to tell you something about him, but she said, you better not. You'll make him mad. So I won't. I'll keep that later. And you know, I'll have to say, truthfully, I've never seen any of them. And I could see you, by the way. I could see you sitting out there. I told my friend here a while back over in Missouri, I said, you've never seen me. He said, what? I said, you've never seen me. You hear a voice, and I'm back in there somewhere, but you've never seen me. And you probably never will in this life. There are parts of us that we will never see without God's help. It's not possible. In one sense, we know ourselves better than anyone else knows us. We also have access to our inner thoughts, feelings, and judgments. In another sense, we know ourselves worse than anyone else does. Why? Because we rationalize, we justify, we minimize, and we embellish. So we know ourselves better than most people know us. We claim too much credit and accept too little blame. We claim too much credit and accept too much blame. We pay attention to experts who agree with our opinions. Do we not? Sure we do. While ignoring or discounting all evidence to the contrary. Our memories are not just simply faulted, they are faulted in favor of our egos. And I don't have one. There is a book called Egonomics. I've never read it. I don't have it. I've never seen it, but there is a book called Egonomics. It cites a survey in which 83% of the people were confident in their ability to make good decisions. 83% to make good decisions. But only 27% were confident in the ability of the people they worked closely with to make good decisions. That was done in a survey. We are stunned when someone sees past our defense into our lives. We're stunned to see that. You got that big facade up there. So we're stunned when somebody sees through that defense. And it's not that they are genius, it's just that we are sitting in a blind spot. And by the way, that's the title of this if you want a title for it. We can't see our own selves. It's not possible. That's what I meant a while ago when I asked you, have you ever seen me? I can tell you haven't. Not really. Go to Jeremiah 17 and verse 9. Jeremiah 17 and verse 9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings. So with that said, when we're trying to judge somebody, and it happens all the time, you ought to think of Jeremiah, chapter 17 and verse 9 and 10. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? The Lord searches the heart. He will be the one that judges our hearts, not us. So if we're trying to judge somebody, you better think about this, because we might get into more trouble than we really want to be in. Without the Spirit of God, it is impossible for us to see ourselves. Go to 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 4. And I know some of these scriptures have already been read, but I also know the Sabbath occurs every 7 days, and we're reminded over and over and over. So we forget easy. So go to 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 4. I'm going to start in verse 3. But even if our gospel is veiled, it is veiled to those who are perishing, whose minds the God of this age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light or the knowledge of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them. I think I can safely say that the light has shined on us. I believe I can say that safely. But we can't see ourselves without the Spirit of God. We have a large blind spot. Sometimes trying to see the truth about ourselves is like trying to see the inside of our own eyeball. You can't do it. It's impossible. Who can discern his own errors? So the psalmist said, who can discern his own errors? Go to Isaiah 5 and verse 20. Isaiah 5 and verse 20 and 23. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes or in their own mind. Woe to the men valiant for mixing intoxicating drinks. I skipped a verse, back up to 22. Woe to men mighty in drinking wine. So if you want to get mighty, go drink you a couple of big glasses of wine tonight. It'll stretch you, boy. You can get right on up there. Woe to men are valiant for mixing intoxicating drinks, who justify the wicked for a bribe and take away justice from the righteous. So if you want to really get strong, go drink some wine. It'll help you out. There was a joke I told about that one time and I got in trouble, so I won't tell you the joke now. But on the other hand, don't be so critical on ourselves that we hurt ourselves, because you can. We can do that. We can be so critical on ourselves that it hurts us. So be careful with it. What is the answer to all this? Number one, look at it. Think about it. Take your time. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't jump to conclusions either way. Just take your time. Be honest. Be patient about it. It will work out. We will see. One of the fruits of the Spirit is patience. Avoid the blind spots. Avoid the blind spots. The Bible talks about putting off certain sins. And that's in Colossians 3 and verse 5. Colossians 3 and verse 5. Let's start reading Colossians 3 and verse 1. If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on this earth. For your deed and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, whom is our life, appears, then you will appear with him in glory. Now verse 5. Therefore put to death your old members. When you went under that watery grave, you literally killed your old spirit, or you were supposed to have. That's what it says right here. Therefore put to death your old members, which are on the earth: fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desires, covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience. It looks like it's coming up on them faster every day or every week, in which you yourself once walked when you lived in them. I've said this so many times about myself. I probably wouldn't even be alive today if it hadn't been for the Church of God. When I started listening to the worldwide broadcast when Sheila, our daughter, was about 8 months old, and she's past 52 now. I've heard people say a lot of bad things about the worldwide. I don't have anything bad to say about them, because they taught a way of life that was right. In spite of all their wrong, they taught a good way of life. They taught etiquette, they taught dress, they taught diet, they taught how to treat your neighbor. There wasn't a thing wrong with any of it. And like I said, I don't know where I might be if it hadn't been for that. And it wasn't easy part of the time, but it's truth. And now I forgot where I am. Colossians 3:5 and verse 6. Because of these things, the wrath of God is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked when you were in them. But now you yourselves are to put off these things: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old man with his deeds, and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him, where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision, barbarian. I don't know how to pronounce that word, C-Y-T-S, Scythian, slave nor free, but Christ is all and in all. So they were all brought in. Every race, everything you can think of is brought in. So we're all in it together. And like I've said, the point is, avoid the blind spots. The Bible also talks about the things that we should do. And that's also in Colossians 3 and starting in verse 12. Therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, put on tender mercies, kindness, humility, meekness, and long-suffering. Do we have all of those traits? A few of them I don't have. I should probably say a few of them I do have, or anyway, I don't have many of them. 13, bearing with one another and forgiving one another. If anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must forgive him. I think that's some very good advice. Forgive him. Forgive him. Let it rest. My word, the man made a mistake. Forget it. Since we didn't make one, it's easy to hang on to them, ain't it? It's like, who said that? It's Ron Elkins keeps bringing up that out of the grave where she had been buried for years. Kept bringing it up. No, don't bring it up. Forget it. Verse 14. Let's see. Verse 13, bearing with one another and forgiving one another if anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. But above all these things, put on love, which is the bond of perfection. And let the peace of God rule in your hearts, to which also you were called in one body, and be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. And whatever you do in the word or deed, do it all in the name of Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. So we avoid the blind spots. And there are some things that we sure need to do. Don't be caught in a blind spot. And that's in Colossians 4 and 2 and verse 6. Go over just a few pages. Colossians 4 and verse 2. For you know what commandments we gave you through the Lord Jesus. For this is the will of God who sanctified verse 3, for this is the will of God, your sanctification, that you should be abstain from sexual immorality. To each of you should know how to possess his own vessel in satisfaction and honor. So we've been called to change and avoid the blind spots. You would ask yourself sometimes, do I come across as hard and jaded, critical, tough, or are we soft? Are we positive or are we negative? Are we preoccupied with ourselves? We need to ask God to help us, because He called us to change us. It wasn't our fault He called us, so He will help us. He called us to change. Ask God to help us. And that includes me, all of us. I'm not going to turn to John 3:19 says, men love darkness. John 3:19 says, men love darkness. You know, brethren, I've said this a few times, and I'll say it again and again and again. This is not a game. We're not here to play games. Now, I know you played games last night, and that's okay. That's not the kind of game I'm talking about. This is serious. This is a matter of life and or death. Spiritual death. I want to ask you a question. I'm going to close this in just a minute. If someone come to you to talk to you in love about your problem or your blind spot, would you hit him? What if he told you he was wrong about something? What if he told you you were sinning somewhere or other? Would you hit him? Would you want to fight him? Or would you accept it? Or would you be offended? I mean, it's something to think about, because somebody's liable to tell you. Somebody's liable to tell you, you're wrong, Wayne. You're wrong, whoever. So I want to close with Psalms 19. Psalms 19 and verse 12. Verse 12. Who can understand his errors? It says, cleanse me from my secret faults. Keep back your servant also from presumptuous sins. Let him not have dominion over me, or let them not have dominion over me. Then I shall be blameless, and I shall be innocent of great transgressions. Verse 14. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer.